They told us the lab studied memory, not mercy. Here's the part no one warned you about. Sometimes help feels like being carried, until you notice the hands are steering. The night it started, rain combed lines through the quad, and the building, with the softest light, swallowed my reflection whole. He said I was exceptional, like the mind under stress turns into a gem if you keep polishing. I wanted to believe it. I wanted a door to open that wasn't locked by tuition or luck. So I followed the glow, the hum, the promises phrased like favors. I didn't see the ledger he kept, the categories I was sliding into, the questions shaped to fit my answers. I thought I was collecting myself, sleep logs, pulse beats, confession fragments. But when your heart becomes data, it stops feeling like yours. Here's the shock. The first time I touched his desk, my name touched me back. I told myself the file was coincidence, a label waiting for content that didn't exist yet. He'd say it was workflow, a placeholder. People like me learn early to explain away the shiver, to translate fear into diligence. So I worked harder. I logged my sleep, my headaches, the moments my hands went numb in exam rooms. He praised my discipline, offered tacit extensions when life pressed its thumb to my chest. I recognized how doors opened for me when he nodded, how other students parted like water. It felt like being chosen, and being chosen felt like relief. But relief has an aftertaste. I kept swallowing it, greedy and grateful, even as the questions he asked began to sound like they were remembering me better than I remembered myself. Convenience arrived like a rhythm I pretended not to hear. A study room always free when my chest tightened. A quiz extended by exactly the minutes I lost to blurry vision. An email reminding me to hydrate after a night I didn't sleep. Each kindness made me lighter, and being lighter made me faster, and being faster made me grateful. Gratitude is a harness you learn to wear yourself. He called it support scaffolding, a clinical way to say you owe someone without ever signing a contract. Noah joked that I had a guardian angel with a calendar, API. I laughed, because it was easier than asking where the timing came from, or why it felt like the building remembered my footsteps and adjusted the lights. He told stories that felt like parachutes opening, students rescued from panic, from poverty, from themselves. In his mouth, struggle had arcs and endpoints. In mine, it kept circling back. He said stress carved memory deeper, that the right pressure made recall bright as a fire alarm. I pictured my brain in cross-section, grooves deepening with every 3 a.m. practice test. He compared me to an instrument, asked what tuning I preferred. Quiet rooms, white noise, the scent of citrus he kept on cotton in a drawer. I wanted to be an instrument with a choice. I breathed in the orange and said it helped. He made a note without looking down, like he already knew. That should have been the moment I asked how. The night the hum grew teeth, I stayed late to finish data entry. The building changed personalities after 10, air vents louder, floors emptier, each monitor glows suddenly personal. I input numbers that collapse hours of living into tidy columns. There's a lie inside every spreadsheet that says order is truth. I reached for a backup drive to mirror the week's intake. The label said, Archive, Surveys. It clicked into the port, and my screen hiccuped. A directory bloomed. Participants, sessions, audio. Then a name, my name, nested like a Russian doll. A clip played half a second. My voice, confessing the time my hands shook so hard I typed nonsense. I didn't remember recording it. But someone did. By morning, the campus felt calibrated to me. A study room pulsed green on the booking app at the exact minute my pulse steadied. My TA wrote, "Don't stress, extension approved," before I'd asked. Notifications braided themselves into a safety net I pretended was luck. I moved inside it like a swimmer staying in the bright lane, telling myself currents were just physics and not design. In the lab, I filled another wellness snapshot. Boxes marching like little mouths waiting to be fed. The consent for 4 pages of courteous legalese told me about anonymized insights and best practices for student support. It did not tell me why the questions knew about citrus or why they mirrored my private habits back at me. Noah skimmed the PDFs and said, softly, "This is generous." Or it's surveillance with good manners. I laughed, because that's easier than calling it by its name. The schedule bent around me as if the building exhaled on command. Doors that stuck for others slid open at my approach. Printers with paper jam reputations fed my pages flawlessly. I wanted to be the sort of person systems loved. Efficient, predictable, rewardable. Kessler called it removing friction, the way an orchestra technician tunes the hall so a whisper can be heard in the background. But my whispers kept getting louder afterward, the echo of obedience traveling farther than I meant it to. I flinched when a push notification reminded me to hydrate 20 minutes after a night of insomnia I hadn't told anyone about. Cause and effect reversed themselves. My life seemed to trail a set of instructions already written. Gratitude kept pace with unease, and between them I walked like a tightrope artist, smiling so the crowd wouldn't notice the wire cutting into my feet. "Noah," said patterns announce themselves if you look sideways at them. He built a quick script to parse the survey exports we were allowed to see, a permissive sandbox that politely hid anything too specific. Still, behind the blur, there were shapes. A cluster of anonymous participants logged identical sleep, spikes after lectures I attended. A row of notes, reference scents, and metronomes I'd never seen mentioned on public forums. My stomach folded into an origami animal, all corners and creases. I thought about the folder on his desk, the crisp serif of my name like a raised scar. "Maybe they're templates," I said. "Maybe," Noah answered, and let the code keep scrolling as if text could whistle. I realized I had been translating coincidence into comfort. But translation can be treason if you start losing your own language in the process. Kessler's praise had a cadence, a metronome that made you nod along. In lab meeting, he spoke about ethical horizons, how innovation walks ahead of regulation and leaves footprints for policy to follow. Everyone laughed in the right places, myself included, because humor is a social solvent, and I wanted to dissolve. He told a story about a student who nearly dropped out, saved, he suggested, by the lab's ecosystem of care. I pictured a terrarium, glass walls, controlled humidity, a heat lamp disguised as sunlight. When he asked for volunteers to pilot a revised intake with fewer burdens, my hand rose before my common sense did. The room approved of me. Approval feels like oxygen. It rushes in. Later, walking home, I wondered why my lungs ached, like I'd been holding my breath. That night, the file name clung to me like static. I tried to study and found myself reading the same sentence until the words lost meaning, syllables turning to marbles in my mouth. I opened the consent again, tracing clauses like escape routes, aggregated, de-identified, opt-out pathways, language that cushions while it corrals. A mirror existed somewhere that knew my exact height, my favorite seat, the hour my resolve thinly veils into panic. I booked a room 2 floors above the lab and watched the hallway cameras blink at a civilized rhythm. The calm felt curated. I imagined deleting myself from their arrays, line by line, a vanishing act done in daylight. Instead, I wrote a single sentence in my notebook. If it is care, it will survive scrutiny. The page trembled anyway. His sour or significant age trembled anyway. I tested the universe the way you test a fence, pressing until the wires sing. I typed a phrase into the week's wellness snapshot that no one would ever say by accident. The Varane has a metronome. Anonymized fields swallowed it. The progress bar turned from gray to green, polite as always. Hours later in the export, a heat map blossomed, and there it was, the exact sentence shorn of punctuation, glowing like a bruise under frosted glass. My skin pulled tight, Maybe I'd seated myself, I thought. Maybe I was the echo and not the voice. But echoes don't schedule the room for you, don't slide a late-night door open before your hand arrives. I scrolled further and found my sleep graph stitched to lecture timestamps, my coping notes reduced to tokens that could be sorted, colored, squeezed. It felt like standing outside my own body, watching someone efficient pack me into labeled boxes. The drive that said archive behaved like a polite liar, answering every question I hadn't asked. I cracked it open in a sandbox and watched directories bloom. Participants, sessions, audio, transcripts. Each folder wore a mask of hashes until one didn't. A subdirectory named with a human grammar hyphen and all, nested where it shouldn't exist. When I clicked, the speakers coughed up my voice in a half-second gasp. My confession about the quiz where my hands shook and my words came out as alphabet salad. The echo made my mouth taste like metal. Timestamps braided with door logs I recognized by muscle memory. My swipe at 2113. A file created at 2114. A note appended at 2116. I imagined a parallel version of me walking alongside. A shadow who volunteered smoother, who signed every form I didn't see. The cursor trembled like a pulse. I took a screenshot. I took 3 more. Noah didn't say I told you so. He spun his laptop around like a stagehand changing a set. Look at the seams, he said. And the seams were beautiful, in the way crime scenes are beautiful to people who solve them. He'd scraped public exports within the sandbox polite fence, then compared them to our internal timestamps, purely to optimize workflow, he said with a cough that wasn't a laugh. Patterns rose like ribs under thin skin. My login minutes before, anonymous entries. My lecture attendance mirrored by synchronized sleep. Spikes across a cluster whose ides rhymed with my own. Templates, I offered. If they are, they're very good at imitating you, he answered. The cursor blinked between us, metronomic, patient. Something about seeing my outline in a data cloud made me feel both enlarged and erased, like a shadow projected across a wall where the light refuses to admit its source. Zara met me where sound goes to die. The concrete stairwell with the wire glass window and the breath of bleach. I said I needed clarification on Rev B. She said the new intake reduced friction. I asked what ecosystem of care meant operationally. She said documentation was evolving. We spoke in puzzle pieces because puzzles feel safer than confessions. When I mentioned the folder with my name, she didn't blink. Her gaze drifted to the blinking dome camera, then back to my hands. Her clipboard corner creased her palm. As we parted, she let a page slip just enough for me to read a fragment. Participant control roster, access and interventions. My throat clicked. The language was cool and stainless. Control roster, interventions. I walked away with my pulse in my ears, counting steps to drown it. I decided to stop being the subject and become the observer, even if that meant turning the lens on myself. After hours, I swiped into the lab and let the door close slowly, so the latch didn't bark. The printer slept like a dog. I woke it with a tap and fed it a benign request. Inventory, paper, toner, then piggybacked a query Noah mocked up. Audit trail, most accessed files tagged with support interventions. The machine thought in whirs and heat. Pages emerged with a gentle cough, and the cough kept going. A roster unspooled. Names black to bars for privacy. Dates, triggers, nudges, outcomes. My name wasn't black. A star sat beside it like a sheriff's badge. The column for interventions read like a diary kept by an algorithm. I felt an urge to run and an equal urge to staple the pages to the building's front door. My ring stopped spinning. I started to copy. I asked for a meeting in the tone students use when they need mercy, not answers. He arranged the chairs at a friendly angle. Lamp, low like dusk. The oranges on the credenza bright as cartoon suns. I set the pages down between us. The audit trail, the roster. My name starred like I'd won a contest I never entered. He didn't flinch. He talked about scaffolds, about how bridges need tension or they collapse. He said I had benefited. He said everyone had. I heard the hum behind his words, the one that makes compliance feel ergonomic. I asked where the consent lived for the parts of me recorded when I didn't know I was speaking. He called it implied, braided through services and surveys and success. The room shrank until the metronome's tick felt like a fingernail on glass. I realized he had designed the echo chamber and taught us to applaud. He reframed every boundary like a courtesy extended. Extensions were generosity. Reminders care. Access equity. He said labels populate early because efficiency saves time, and time is the one resource students can't replace. He admired my resilient signature, as if my nervous system were a font he preferred. I asked what happened to students who said no. He smiled the way people smile at a hypothetical. He said none had. He said choice existed. And of course, support would continue regardless. The language drifted until it stopped meaning anything at all. Care, cohort, outcomes, fidelity. Words polished to a sheen that reflected only his face. I pictured my voice clipped into 6-second fossils. My steps converted to instrument noise. My ring's tiny metronome logged as heart health. When I rose, the chair leg scraped so loud even he blinked. If it's care, I said, it should survive daylight. Zara waited in the corridor like a comma. Small pause. Enormous meaning. She didn't say sorry. She said procedures. She didn't say stop. She said be careful what you put in writing. Her eyes bounced to the ceiling camera as if watching a second conversation hover there. She told me the IRB had language for edge cases. She told me revisions were pending. She told me the dean preferred quiet corridors to crowded rooms. I heard what didn't fit inside her sentences. She had a ledger of her own, I realized. Indentations where rules pressed too hard. When she shifted her clipboard, a tab with my initials flashed and hid. The urge to demand, to beg, to recruit her as witness pressed at my ribs. Instead, I asked for the audit channel no one advertises. She exhaled. Look in the version history of the consent, Rev B to Rev C, she said, voice thin as paper. Don't print it! We met in the lecture hall after hours, the kind of room that keeps applause in its bones. I told Noah everything quickly, so the courage wouldn't evaporate while I spoke. He opened his laptop and let silence do its job. Together we pulled up the consent archive and walked backward through each revision, like descending stairs into colder air. In Rev C, a paragraph had been split. Supportive nudges acquired a clause about contextual signals. In Rev B, the same sentence wore the polite suit of aggregate trends. In the earliest draft, a tracked change floated like a ghost with Kessler's initials in the margin. My name didn't need to be there for me to feel named. Noah's knuckles went white on the trackpad. This isn't care, he said quietly. This is control with a good bedside manner. I thought of the folder tab, the star on the roster, the way doors anticipated me and shivered. I wrote the email like a fuse. Short, exact, impossible to ignore. Subject line, request for formal review of data practices, memory, and stress lab. I attached the audit trail, the roster, the version diffs. I wrote a paragraph that fit on a screen without scrolling. Then I hit send to the dean's office. CCD, compliance, blind copied Noah. For a second, the air went thin, as if the building had paused to listen. The next second, responses cascaded. Received. Scheduling, please refrain from further access pending inquiry. Kessler replied last, measured and warm, inviting me to clarify concerns in person so we could avoid misunderstandings. I closed the laptop and stared at my hands like they belonged to a stranger who'd done something irreversible. The rain began again, gentle at first, then loud enough to erase the metronome from the room. For the first time in weeks, I heard my heart beat as mine. The plan began as a dare to our own nerves. Collect enough truth that daylight couldn't bleach it. Noah printed a floor map from a facility's brochure and traced power routes with a gel pen, while I listed what made the claims undeniable. Access logs, protocol drafts, any signature that wasn't supposed to exist. We rehearsed quiet like choreography. Who breathed when? Who watched the hall while the other plugged in? What to say if a custodian asked why we were there? I hated the word heist because it made me sound like a thief, but the inventory of me already sat on their shelves. I was just walking down the aisle with a cart. We set timestamps to match the building's clock, prepped a dead man upload that would fire if my hands stopped moving. Outside, rain softened the world's edges. Inside my head, everything sharpened until there was only the doing. Buildings at night pretend to sleep. Only the systems are honest. The badge reader blinked like a polite metronome as we slipped in behind a delivery cart. The corridor smelled like toner and lemon disinfectant. An innocence that felt theatrical. Zara rounded the corner with a clipboard shield and did not look at us, which was its own kind of looking. She paused at the server cage a hair longer than necessary and set a maintenance tag at a jaunty angle, the universal sign for "No one's supposed to care." My chest counted seconds. Noah whispered, "Window, 12 minutes," as if he'd negotiated with the HVAC. I slid my card and felt the locks bolt withdraw like a breath. The lab lights came up one level, enough for shadows to learn our names. We moved without speaking, every sound rehearsed in the library until even our silence had muscle memory. Server rooms are cathedrals for people who pray to order. We knelt to ports and status lights, each blink a syllable. Noah launched the collector, a neat little octopus, pulling logs from places that like to pretend they were oceans. I paged through IRB folders, expecting the familiar choreography of consent language, and found a draft that wore no filing number. Its margins annotated in a precise hand I recognized from exams, returned with praise. Off-books, protocols nested inside like contraband, schedules of contextual signals, matrices of nudges, a phantom column for eligibility that read like a horoscope for intervention. The room's white noise swelled until it felt like standing inside a seashell. I photographed everything twice, once to prove it existed, and once to prove I hadn't imagined it. When a progress bar crawled past 90%, I felt a small vertebra of fear click back into place. Kessler's office held its breath the way rooms do when they're complicit. I cataloged the desk like an archivist, leather notebook, fountain pen with a black halo of dried ink, a coaster framing a ring that wasn't mine. In a drawer, a voice recorder the size of a candy bar. On it, files named with dates and anodyne words. Debrief, follow-up, context. I pressed play on one, a 6-second fossil of me describing citrus like a memory trick. My mouth went dry. Handwriting unlaced across a draft. Resilient signature, high value. Track longitudinally. The sentence looked like a compliment sneaking past customs. The hallway shifted its weight. I felt the building listening. Noah texted one word, footsteps, and every muscle learned a new tense. I pocketed the recorder as if it were the smallest truth with the loudest voice. We left no drawers open. We left everything slightly more aligned than we found it, as if tidiness were a disguise. We stitched our exit to the weather, timing the stairwell door with a gust that made it thunk like an accident. Outside, the rain had upgraded from soundtrack to curtain, kind enough to erase shapes. Noah's script pushed the last of the archive into the vault. My phone vibrated with a confirmation that sounded like a heartbeat rendered in pixels. We didn't run, because running is a confession in a language cameras understand. We walked, steady as if retrieval were a kind of prayer. At the corner, The lab's windows stacked themselves into a grid of eyes. I thought of every time convenience had met me at the threshold and wondered what it looked like from in there now that I had taken myself back. The ring on my finger stopped moving, as if it had found a home position at last. Tomorrow would be the machine. Tonight, we had the parts. The meeting invite called it informal resolution, which is how institutions dress tension in a cardigan. Dean Park's conference room smelled like tea and printer ink. The chairs were soft enough to make you forget posture. She opened with phrases nodded to caution, shared goals, student well-being, process integrity, and I heard the word risk braided through everyone. Kessler arrived in immaculate calm smile, tuned to the room's frequency, gratitude for the opportunity to clarify. He spoke about the burden of innovation, how guardrails catch only after someone proves a road is there. I watched the clock secondhand jog like a runner and felt my lungs bargain with the pace. He offered to pause enhancements while policy caught up. The dean called that constructive. When I mentioned my name in a folder and a star beside it, he said, prototypes often inherit legacy labels. And then he looked at me, like we shared a private joke I had simply forgotten. The machine spun up around us, emails with bullet points that sounded like lullabies, calendar blocks titled Listening Session, a campus statement that praised pioneering care without naming the thing that cut. Faculty replies bloomed like white flowers after rain. Testimonials to mentorship, a chorus of gratitude with my doubt tuned out of the mix. Kessler CD'd me on a note to the dean about guidance to limit rumor velocity. And I felt the language try to sand my edges down. Noah kept our archive mirrored in 3 clouds and 1 hard copy in a shoebox under my bed. We counted redundancies like rosary beads. At night, the lab's windows held steady as constellations. In the morning, a student I didn't know thanked me for making waves, like Scandal was a surf class. I smiled, because rage needs a lid until the boil matters. If the truth was going to hold, it needed a spine made of dates and signatures, not feelings. Dean Park convened a formal intake with an etiquette that felt like velvet over a gate. 2 compliance officers flanked her with laptops open to forms that parsed my sentences into fields. Describe the event, one said. And I learned how to braid emotion into chronology so it wouldn't snap. List corroboration, the other said. And I recited file names like a liturgy. Kessler submitted a statement the same hour, precise, gracious, insisting on misinterpretation, and the unfortunate conflation of support services with research artifacts. The word artifact clung to me like dust. I kept seeing the star beside my name, and the way doors sighed open before my hands arrived. When they asked what remedy I sought, I surprised myself. Not expulsion, not spectacle, just a stop. A reckoning in daylight, a record that could not be tidied away. The dean's pen paused, then resumed, the smallest heartbeat sketched in ink. Kessler pivoted to reputation, a currency that compounds in public. He hosted a colloquium titled Care at Scale, a theater where the slides wore hallows and the anecdotes clapped for themselves. I sat in the back row and felt the room lean toward him. Charisma is gravity when you're tired. He spoke about models that listen and consent as conversation, phrases that sparkle until you touch them and find glitter on your palm for days. Midway through, my phone buzzed with a message from Zara, an image of a log file header I'd never seen, then a single line, coffee after. I left before the applause could baptize me. In the cafe's quiet, she put a folded printout between us, palms still on it like a priest finishing a blessing. Audit trail of edits, she said, voice barely above the milk steamer. At the bottom, initials bracketed a change that converted opt-in to imply. Zara's evidence read like a witness who'd learned to speak in metadata. Version histories chained themselves into a single unbroken line, author tags, timestamps, language that marched from explicit opt-in required to implied by participation in support ecosystem, each edit initialed AC. There were comments too. Tidy, professional, asking legal to harmonize language with practice. My breath shortened to the length of those remarks. Noah scanned and scanned again, then backed the files into the vault until redundancy felt like armor. Outside, rain slowed to a mist that made the streetlights look kind. We understood then what the machine feared. Not outrage, but documentation that breathed without us in the room. The dean pinged to schedule an evidentiary review. Kessler announced a sabbatical to reflect. I turned Zara's printout, so the signature aligned with the light. Tomorrow would be public. Tonight, we rehearsed telling the truth without apology. Morning arrived like a verdict I had asked for. I built the dossier in a clean, unflinching order. Screenshots with timestamps, version histories with initials, the roster star that turned admiration into custody. The words didn't need adjectives. The facts breathed on their own. I wrote a preface small enough to fit inside a phone screen and large enough to hold a spine. Consent is not retroactive. Care without choice is control. Noah checked the checksum and nodded once. I sent the file to the dean, the compliance portal, and the campus paper. I posted a public link that didn't accuse so much as illuminate. For a beat, the world didn't change. Then the link reproduced the way light does. 1,000 opens, a ripple of receipts, a quiet chorus of messages that all began the same way. I think this happened to me. The building across the quad gleamed like nothing had shifted. But inside my chest, something stood up. The evidentiary review felt like weather. We entered it and let it happen around us. Dean Park chaired with a calm that measured every syllable. 2 faculty from outside the department watched the screen as if it were a heart monitor. I spoke in the grammar of sequence. This time, this document, this signature. Kessler's statement arrived inside a suit of plausibility, immaculate, and self-regarding. He emphasized intent, invoked pilot culture, split the hair between enhancement and experiment until it looked like thread. Zara's printout traveled the table like contraband in plain sight. When she confirmed the edits, no triumph crossed her face, only relief shaped like fatigue. Noah explained the log parity between my card swipes and the anonymous entries without the swagger of a magician, just the steadiness of someone who trusts arithmetic. The room's silence changed temperature. Dean Park asked no showy questions. She only circled a date and wrote it twice. Campus learned a new word out loud. Accountability. Not shouted, not on cardboard. Spoken in offices, whispered between vending machines, taught in seminars as if it were a theory with proofs. The student paper ran the dossier with hyperlinks that opened like trapdoors. Flyers replaced glossy awards with QR codes and dates. In my inbox, gratitude sat beside anger and grief. The paragraphs braided into something that felt like community, or a weather system finally naming its pressure. A notice went up on the lab door. Operations paused, pending review. I walked the long way to class and counted the windows I had once taken as kindness. They remained glass. That was their nature. The change was that people could see through. Noah joked that transparency had a loading screen. Zara didn't joke. She sent me a single sentence. You did not imagine this. I realized the past hadn't been erased. It had been captioned. Institutional language finally found its verbs. The email was brief. Administrative leave, effective immediately. Independent inquiry. Interim policy requiring explicit, revocable consent for any contextual signal beyond declared coursework. The words didn't repair anything, but they built a table where repair could sit. Kessler announced a sabbatical in his own statement, a velvet curtain pulled over a locked door. I returned my lab keycard in a plain envelope and kept the ring on my finger. Not as a metronome, but as an artifact of choice. Zara met me in the stairwell and didn't speak. We just stood inside the quiet we had earned. Noah left a carton of takeout on my desk with a sticky note shaped like a shield. The campus didn't erupt, it exhaled. The building looked the same. The map had changed. I slept that night without recording it, and in the morning, I recognized my breath by its sound alone. I walked the length of the quad at first light, when the world keeps its voice low. The lab's windows were dark, monitors asleep. The server's hum softened to background weather. I imagined future students crossing here with hands that trembled for ordinary reasons. Exams, newness, love. Not because a system decided trembling made them legible. I didn't forgive. That wasn't what this was. I placed my palm on the cool glass anyway, a gesture not of blessing but of boundary. Behind me, the bell tower counted the hour like a pulse, unconnected to any device. The ring on my finger didn't move. I breathed, and the breath belonged to me, unmeasured. When the doors opened elsewhere and ordinary footsteps started their day, I turned toward them. There would be statements and reports, meetings and memory. There would also be a morning. I chose the morning.